He's a controversial Dutch lawmaker on trial for inciting religious hatred. He's also been made a kingmaker in recent elections. With Geert Wilders in the spotlight, are the Dutch reconsidering their reputation for tolerance? And should this alarm Muslims and immigrants in Europe? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Laura Kyle. Welcome to the programme. Well, he's been accused of inciting hatred, but he says he was simply expressing an opinion. Dutch politician Geert Wilders is on trial for making comments against Islam. Amongst other things, he's compared the religion to Nazism and called for a ban against the Quran, which he says is a fascist book. His defence is, quite simply, freedom of expression. This case against Wilders comes as politicians in the Netherlands have accepted a coalition government which has the backing of Wilders' party following last June's general elections. Wilders' Freedom Party, or the PVV, secured over 1 million votes, and that translates into 24 seats in Parliament. Whilst many politicians seem reluctant to work with him, his support for this right-wing government is considered quite critical. Well, joining our discussion today are our guests. In Amsterdam, Bertus Hendricks, political analyst at the Klingendahl Institute of International Relations. In Bern, Switzerland, Fahad Afshar, president of the Coordination of Islamic Organisations and sociologist at Bern University. And in London, Robin Simcox, research fellow at the Centre for Social Cohesion. So Simcox, if we could start with you. Wilders' stance is clearly resonating quite widely with the Dutch. Why might that be?
Well, I think Wilders is talking about a lot of things which the Dutch people may have felt have been beyond discussion for a long time. Obviously, the number one topic is Islam. But I think multiculturalism more generally and immigration are other things that Wilders has touched upon. Now, obviously, Wilders is hugely controversial, polarises opinion. But what I think you can't deny is that he is discussing subjects which maybe the mainstream Dutch politicians haven't touched upon for a long time. I think that explains a lot of his popularity.
Are you surprised by his rise to power?
I'm not sure if I'm surprised. I think it happens when people feel, and obviously you see what's happened in Sweden, where also far-right parties have gained there. I think this is what happens when an electorate begins to feel disenfranchised, and I think that is increasingly happening in Europe, and Wilders is really just a manifestation of that, and Holland has been the first country where it's happened in.
OK, Fahad Afshar, let's bring you in here. Do you agree that Wilders is touching on something that many people in the Netherlands feel?
No, I don't agree, because it's quite easy to produce fear. If you remember the history in the former century, there was a tendency, a policy to create fear from the Jewish population. In whole Europe, we had an increase of fascist movement, racist movement, and everyone was fearing the Jewish influence in the world. And now the same thing is happening to the Muslim. We have just changed the scapegoats, and that's not surprising, because fear is not rising from the heart of the people, but it's initiated and it's produced by mass media and by politicians.
OK, I want to talk more broadly about Europe a little later in the discussion. Prefer to stick to the Netherlands just for the moment. Bertus Hendricks, what do you think Wilders' appeal is?
Well, the wave of immigration has been very large in Holland, and we have had a very liberal immigration policy. And as long as the situation economically and politically was very stable, they didn't create too many problems. But as the strains under the system became clearer, as especially the problems with the second and third generation of children from the first wave of immigrants, mainly from Morocco and to a lesser extent from Turkey, came to the fore, then, you know, people in the poorer areas of the big cities felt that there were lots of problems, small criminality, petty crimes, and so on and so forth, that were not taken sufficiently into account by the mainstream parties who were accused of not addressing the issue squarely because of fear of being considered politically incorrect. So it was alleged that political correctness prevented the establishment parties of seeing the real problems, ignoring some of those. And then the mixture of Islam, because it happened to be that the bulk of the people from the countries that where we were having problems with were mainly from Islamic backgrounds. So people started to make the link, and it didn't start with Wilders. It started with Pim Fortuyn, who was more sophisticated than Wilders, and who was murdered in 2002. And then the Islam critique became part of the social critique, if you wish. And on top of that, you know, global developments like the rise of extremist Islam, the attacks of 9/11 in New York and Washington, Afghanistan war, Iraq war. I mean, all these things added to the cocktail. And in particular in Holland, of course, things got worse when Theo van Gogh, the Dutch filmmaker who helped Ayaan Hirsi Ali realize her film Submission was a critique of Islam, when he was murdered by a Moroccan, a Dutch-born guy of Moroccan origin, you know, then of course Islamic extremism was present in the streets of Amsterdam, and this gave, of course, an enormous added value, at least perceived like this, to the critique of Islam. Then others sought to surf on that wave. It was first Rita Verdonk, who came from the same party, the Conservative Party, as Wilders.
Okay,
and then now it is Wilders.
Let's bring Fahad Afshar back in here. Do you think that this fear is based on real fact in the Netherlands?
There are, of course, some persons, you may call them radical believers, but you would have it in every religion. That's not the main subject. Even in countries like Switzerland, we don't have Islamic radicalism. We are facing a form of repression against Islam, and Islamophobia has become a very modern, up-to-date behavior of politicians who would like to gain more support, more political support by announcing Islam as a very dangerous force to the society. And you will face it everywhere in Europe. I don't understand why, you can look to France, why the problem of a little scarf would pose such a threat to the French Republic to forbid it.
Okay, Robin Simcox,
So,
we are hearing that the Christian Democratic Appeal Party in the Netherlands is deciding to accept Wilders' support in their coalition government that they're just forming. Do you think this is a sign that Wilders' views are indeed becoming more mainstream?
Well, I think you have to really separate Holland off. Holland, I think that probably is the case. But if you look at Europe more generally, for example, the United Kingdom, I mean, just to go back to the last point, Islam really is barely discussed at all. I think there is still quite a culture of political correctness about the whole issue. I think you see, I mean, there's always going to be small amounts of racist groups that exist, unfortunately. But I think what you increasingly see is this issue of Islam and multiculturalism and Islamism increasingly resonating with people in European countries, but the political class often not really being willing to take it on. And as I mentioned, I think Wilders is the first person, with the exception of perhaps of Pim Fortuyn, to really do this in a quite forceful and outspoken way. And obviously it has resonated, be it because of the economic situation or other social factors. Wilders is picking up votes, and I think you really have to look at why that is.
Well, Geert Wilders is well known for his outspoken views. Here are some of his past comments. He says, "I've had enough of Islam in the Netherlands. Let not one more Muslim immigrate. Islam is not a religion, it's an ideology, the ideology of a retarded culture." He's also said he has a problem with Islamic tradition, culture, ideology, but not with Muslim people. And he's declared we have to stop the tsunami of Islamisation. It's affecting our heart, our identity, our culture. Certainly some very inflammatory language there. Mr. Afshar, how does it make you feel when you hear these words?
Well, it's not very strange for me if you just replace the verb Islam by Jew, you could have a lot of documents from the former century. But if you compare Europe to America, in America no one would prevent a religious group by implementing their religious tradition. Let me tell you, we have since 40 years difficulty to have a cemetery here for Muslims. And no one in America would understand why such an issue would rise to a problem. You have even very strange behavior like the Amish, who like to live with the tradition of 18th century, and no one takes care about them. They let them live. There's another form of tolerance against the religious minority than in Europe. In Europe, the tendency is not to integrate the Muslim community, but to assimilate them. Just as a Swiss writer has told, Max Frisch spoke about the issue, and he told in a book he has written, they asked for a labor force and people came. And that's the main issue. People can't let their religion aside. The religion is a part of their identity. You can't say, I don't hate Muslim, but I hate Islam. Whoever hates Islam hates people.
It does seem to be something of an anomaly indeed. Bertrand Hendricks, what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's a rather strenuous exercise on the part of Wilders to say, I'm only attacking a political ideology. He doesn't want to accept that Islam is one of the great religions. And I'm not attacking Muslims. I mean, that is a very strenuous distinction that is not felt by any Muslim. Every Muslim clearly feels that it is aimed at them. When you talk about a tsunami of Muslims, as one politician said very rightly these days, people, it's not Qurans that are imported, it's people that immigrate. And so you can't make this distinction. But he's trying to peddle the tired theory of a kind of Muslim conspiracy that is, a kind of latter-day repeat of the Turks before the gates of Vienna, wanting to take over, in the sense that we must make sure that we are becoming minority, and then we are going to impose Sharia and all this kind of thing. All this is such a rubbish, and I think many people are aware of this. But he is surfing on this wave of fear and insecurity in a time of crisis, globalization having reached the point where people are questioning themselves about what is Dutch identity, and then you have a wave of immigrants who predominantly come also from the same cultural area, and who in the past, there has been a kind of tension between the civilizations, if you wish. And he is trying to construe that argument that really you basically can't trust Muslims, because his intellectual sidekick and speechwriter would even made the accusation recently that if there is no such things as moderate Islam, a moderate Muslim is somebody who is using taqiyya, hiding his true intentions in order to take over. I mean, this is such a weird conspiracy theory, and the fact that it gets any traction is a rather sorry state of comment to the situation in Holland, actually, at the moment. But it is not limited to Holland.
Robin Simcox, by giving someone such as Geert Wilders such a public platform, does it not risk alienating people who are very good citizens?
But, I mean, who's giving the public platform? He's in the public platform because to a certain amount of Dutch people, he's popular. I mean, I don't see how you can avoid that. I think you've just got to look at the issues around it. And if I could just quickly come back on a point that's been made a couple of times now about Muslims being the new Jews. This is a myth. Muslims have complete freedom of religion in Europe. I mean, the Jews under Nazi Germany were gassed and killed. Nothing remotely comparable is even thought about happening, where Muslims have exactly the same freedom of religion as Europe amends to all minority religions.
OK, well, we've been touching on Europe because it does appear to be something of a trend across the whole continent, this right-wing party gaining significant support. The European Parliament elections of 2009, for example, proved a major victory for the supporters of the far right. And as we've been discussing, the Netherlands in June, elections left a coalition needing the support of the right wing. Just last month in Sweden, the far right made its debut in the parliament with over 5% of the votes, winning 20 seats. In France, the National Front did well in the regional elections earlier this year with up to 12% of the vote. Far-right parties have been enjoying similar successes in Italy, Switzerland, Belgium, Norway and Bulgaria. Well, many of these countries are famous for their liberalism. Mr. Hendricks, return to you. Do you think that they are simply exploiting the circumstances of the time, as you mentioned just a little earlier?
Yes, and I would hope it would be a passing phenomenon, and I think it will. But what is so dangerous of the present political situation is that now we are going to get a government with a very tiny minority of one seat, 76 out of 150, tolerated by Geert Wilders. And he is not taking any responsibility, but he is sitting at the center of power. And so he can have this very easy condition. And the difficulty and the danger is that because the Christian Democrats desperately want to cling to power, have acceded to his demands with the Conservative Party, and that as a result of this, you know, the ideas of Wilders somehow become socially acceptable, somehow become mainstream, that it is somehow politically correct nowadays to consider all these things as a legitimate opinion instead of the kind of incitement and discrimination that it basically is. And I think that is a difficult situation. And we have seen in Denmark...
Mr. Simcox, is it a passing phenomenon?
Well, I don't think we can really put it like that, because these things we've been talking about, Wilders isn't the first person to mention them. I think it's a manifestation that's been going on for a long time, where, I mean, earlier there was a reference to Europe assimilating Muslims rather than integrating them. I actually think the opposite's true. In Europe, a lot of the discussion at the moment is how certain ethnic minority communities we haven't managed to integrate them at all. And I think that is a pressing, bigger problem. How do we begin that process of making, for example, Muslims in Europe integrate into Europe better? And I think Wilders goes about it the wrong way. But that's one of the things that I think what he says resonates with people on a larger base.
Mr. Afshar, what do you know of immigrants' experience? Do they have a hard time assimilating, integrating? Should they even be assimilating?
No, the problem of the immigrants has arisen in recent years, because 30 years ago no one cared about such issues. Now, in our days, really the issue of Islam has become a political issue for a European country, but it's not only on the personal level like some European politicians, it's also a strategic level. After the breakdown of the Soviet Union, Europe needed a new picture of an enemy, and the fear of communists was replaced systematically. Just remember Huntington and hundreds of other scholars and scientists and think tanks. A new fear of Islam was created, and you see what happened. Not Islamic armies are threatening now European country or American territory, but European armies are staying and fighting in Islamic countries. So when you speak about democracy, integration, human rights, you have to ask it, does it have any credibility in the world? Do the people believe you when you bomb countries and say we are bringing you freedom, we are bringing you human rights? No Afghan family can understand why a village should be bombed.
Well, whether credible or not, these extremist beliefs do appear to be entering more into the mainstream. What do you think the response should be?
I think that the response should be dialogue among cultures, dialogue among civilization. The Muslim minority is quite well integrated in Europe. It's not true that they are not integrated. They are not accepted. If you would compare the Muslim minority in Europe with minorities in America, then you can see how well they are integrated and how well they are behaving in Europe and how much they are identifying them with Europe. So, but the Islam as culture, as religion, is not accepted. And we should discuss this issue more than integration, the acceptance and the dealing with different cultures. because our world is now getting day by day more globalized, and therefore it's quite necessary to find solution to living together by different values. We can't have everyone bring them to have our values.
Okay.
So, but we have to find solution how we can get along with different values in peace.
Okay, Mr. Hendricks, I can see you agreeing there. You think this should be one for public
Yes.
debate, or should they be frozen from the debate?
No, I certainly shouldn't be frozen from the debate. And I think we will get where Mr. Farhad Afshar is speaking about. Because even as we are facing a rather difficult situation in Holland today, there are other voices who are saying, among them, alert Christian Democrats who are unhappy about the turn that their party is taking, who are arguing about the need not only to talk about our identity in the West as a Judeo-Christian identity, but to acknowledge the things that we owe throughout history to the Islamic civilization, and to talk about a Judeo-Christian Islamic identity that will be evolved in time. And related to that is, of course, that probably in the not too distant future, one of the biggest Islamic country, Turkey, is perhaps becoming a member of the European Union, even if Wilders, would be normally opposed to that. But I think this debate is ongoing. We are at present in a very difficult situation, but I'm optimistic that somehow, as Mr. Afshar said, the economic integration of Muslims is proceeding more and more successfully. Then after a while, this cultural dimension will also be part of it. And Islam will change in Europe as it will change in any environment. It's a dynamic civilization, and something like a European form of Islam will evolve out of all this. And then I think it will be a discussion of the past, but it doesn't mean that the immediate future is not very bleak indeed.
Okay, well, it does seem that all three of you are in agreement over the fact that there needs to be public debate. But Mr. Simcox, do you also agree that the immediate future is very bleak?
I think the immediate future, it can be as bleak as we want. I think a couple of things just need to be said. There is no question that Europeans are not creating an enemy amongst Muslims. That is just a complete untruth. America, you've got to remember, with British support, bombed a Christian country in Kosovo in defence of Muslims in 1999. Europe is an overwhelmingly tolerant place for Muslims. To say that they're being made to feel outcast is just not true. I agree that there needs to be further debate as to how best to integrate Muslims into the country, but it's very easy to just dismiss everything as saying the answer to everything is more dialogue, more debate. That seems to be the answer to everything at the moment, and I think we've got to look at some pretty hard truths, which is, unfortunately, integration hasn't happened as well as we like. British-born Muslims set off bombs on London trains. We can't skirt around that fact, and there have been a host of other convictions. These are hard facts, they're unpleasant ones, but I think they're ones we have to face up to.
They're born Irish and they're bombing around. So it's very easy. If something happens, you link it always with Islam. Why don't you link it with social problems, with political problems?
I'm not the one linking it to Islam. They do.
No. Yeah, and it's something of a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy because of the tensions that there are, and because of young Muslims in Europe feel appalled by what is happening in the name of the Western world in big parts of the Islamic world. So you get, like we in the 60s, used to revolt against the policy about Vietnam. Now you get young Muslims who revolt against the policy against the Islamic world. Some of them become very radicalized. They become extremists, like in London, Madrid. And this, again, of course, adds to the tension within the European society. So that is a real problem. I don't want to go over these very important things, and it's good that Mr. Robinson Simcox mentioned them. But I think that in the end, the most important way of integration is through the economic way, and that is that that young people get good education, get good work, and now in the crisis that is a problem, but we have to solve that primarily. And then I think the cultural dialogue and the cultural adaptation and mutual acceptance will stand a greater chance. And also belittling and isolating the fringe of radical extremists who bomb underground stations in Madrid and London and possibly elsewhere.
And gentlemen, I'm afraid we will have to leave it. It's clearly a discussion which will be going on for some time. In Amsterdam, Bertus Hendricks; in Bern, Switzerland, Farhad Afshar; and in London, Robin Simcox. Thank you all very much for joining us. And that's it for this edition of Inside Story. If you want to get involved in the discussion, do email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.